First, bringing attention to the posture. Bring energy to the spine. Allow it to be upright, but not rigid. Allow the head to rest gently on top of the spine. Being pulled from above by a string. Let the chin drop gently. Allow the arms to rest at the sides. Allow the hands to rest in the lap. And bringing some appreciation to the foundation of the posture. The legs, hips, feet. Allow the posture to be energetic, but neither stiff nor fidgety. Allow it to be relaxed and open and receptive, but neither dull nor drained. Slouchy. And bring the same balance to the mind heart, what we call chitta. So bringing energy and effort, but not bubbling over into busyness or worry. Bringing a relaxed receptivity. Without sinking into dullness or drowsiness or sleep. And creating an anchor before we begin to return to again and again. This anchor could be the breath in a certain part of the body or the breath in the whole body. It could be a word or a phrase such as peaceful or gentle or Buddha, metta. Whatever your anchor is, establish it now. And determine to return again and again. If the mind wanders off into thinking or ruminating or memories or planning, as soon as you notice, come back to your anchor without judgment and normalize enjoying waking up. I'm awake. I'm back. We can appreciate our own efforts and the results of those efforts. As we move into silent meditation, imbue the body with a sense of gratitude for the space and the people holding the space, recognizing our own generosity and that we are those people. That this is safe and welcoming. And it's a wholesome place to spend the next half hour doing this wholesome thing. And we can enjoy that, or rest in it. For those who are new here, my name is Jessica Swanson. I'm the spiritual director of the community, and I've been practicing here for about 20-something years. 21 maybe. I'm really happy to be here with everyone. I've been starting our reflections recently with some readings from Ajahn Chah, who is before he passed, was the senior most monastic in our lineage. He's from Thailand. He's back there on the wall. So I'll just go ahead and do that this morning as well. These are some similes of his. He, like the Buddha, was a gifted speaker, and he looked at everything through the lens of Dhamma, particularly nature. And so he has many recorded similes that compare the way of nature to the way of Dhamma. The compass. It's like having a compass that points north and south. You go into the forest carrying the compass with you, and it will still point north and south. But suppose that the day after you go into the forest, you open your compass and decide that the south end of the needle is pointing west and the north end of the needle is pointing east. That's when you have to realize it's just a matter of your own thinking. You're thinking wrong. The needle's still pointing north and south all the time, but you understand that it's pointing east and west. You know, and you follow this kind of knowledge. But it's an issue of your thoughts, which you can dissolve, an issue of your feelings, which you can dissolve. The compass is always pointing north and south, but you feel that it is pointing east and west. The mistake is with you. The saltiness of salt. And Buddhism is like salt. Salt is always salty. Whoever eats it will find that it is always salty. Whoever doesn't eat it won't taste the saltiness. In the same way, Buddhism can't degenerate. People degenerate. Buddhism doesn't degenerate. Some people see monks behaving in a bad way and they blame Buddhism. It's like a person who doesn't eat salt isn't salty. Actually, the saltiness of salt is there all the time. If anyone eats the saltiness will appear. That's the way it is with Buddhism. This next story is this next simile is rather famous, and I quite like it myself. Thinking of earthworms. These days, Thai people are ordaining less and less. I don't know why. Whether it's because of their work, because the world is developing, I don't know. In the past, people would ordain for at least 4 years, 5 years. But now, there are people ordaining for 7 days, 15 days. There are even people who ordain in the morning and disrobe in the evening. It's because of this sort of thing that Buddhism will disappear. Some people say that if people ordained the way I say, 3 or 5 years, the country wouldn't develop. We'd run out of people staying at home. There wouldn't be anyone making a living. We wouldn't be able to keep up with the world. So I tell them that this kind of thinking is the thinking of earthworms. Earthworms live in the dirt. They've been eating dirt from the very beginning. But even though they keep on eating, they're afraid So when they excrete dirt, they put it up next to their heads to eat, for they're afraid they'll run out of dirt. This is the thinking of earthworms. People who think that the world won't develop, come to an end. That's the thinking of earthworms. I was listening to a talk by a monk named Ajahn Jayasaro, who refers to this same phenomenon, not referring to that there was a point at which, and I don't have first-hand knowledge of this, but he was talking about a point in recent Thai history where the country was developing quite quickly. Economic development was taking a forefront, and the government was instructing the monks to stop teaching contentment because there was a concern that it would hinder economic development. And that was the concern. But Ajahn Jayasara made the point, actually, that the teachings of Buddha, the Buddhist teachings, are always in context. So, if you're teaching contentment, you're also teaching diligence. If you're teaching ease, you're also teaching effort. If you're teaching patience, you're also teaching wisdom. You can't take contentment, for example, out of the context of the larger, canon of Buddhist teachings and call it a problem. It's kind of funny, though. I've been thinking about the concept of patience. It's the topic of a group that's meeting later today, and so I've had my thoughts on it for a while, and have been reading and turning it over in my mind. And patience is one of these concepts in Buddhism that has almost no relationship to the concept West or of anything we've grown up and learned and practiced in our own lives. Generally, when we think of patience in our lives, or being taught patience as a kid or as an adult or as a student, it's sort of the best you can do is bear with something until it's over. And that's really great, according to what we have learned so far. Just hang on, it'll be over soon, you can deal with it longer, etc. But the practice of patience in this framework in Buddhism is quite different from that, actually, and it's really misunderstood. And so I'm taking a risk up here, trying to explain it. But essentially, patience or khanti in this framework is bearing with that which is difficult without any kind of deadline, without any kind of hope that the conditions will change, without any kind of expectation that if we hang in there, it'll be over soon, something will change. In fact, Ajahn Sumedho, who is Ajahn Chah's senior-most Western disciple and who comes here occasionally, Ajahn Sumedho defines patience as simply, bearing with the unpleasant. That's patience. We don't have to have patience with the fun stuff, do we? It doesn't even occur to us to have patience with that which we enjoy. We're bearing with what is unpleasant, growing our patience. And how it's different in, other than that, how it's different in our framework, in the Buddhist framework, is that we're not waiting for the condition. We're waiting for our heart to change. We're waiting for our heart to change. So the patience that we're having, to a degree, is with ourselves. It's like I was home. I was in Minnesota visiting family recently. That's where I spent some time growing up. And my family, my kids and my husband and I go back every year, a couple of weeks. And we see these good friends. We only see them once a year for a couple hours, but they're good friends. We make an effort. And they are, this wonderful couple. I've known them many, 25 years. They're married, they're active, they go on usually 2 trips every year. They go to a place they know and a place that's new. And I think that's just wonderful. They hike, they used to do climbing. And they love the outdoors. That's their main focus of all of their vacations. And so I said, haven't you been out to visit me? Do you know where I live? It's quite well known for the hiking and the mountains and the oceans, the rivers and the weather. I did not get a good answer to that question. But then I also asked, have you ever traveled abroad? Have you, and they said, yeah, they went to Spain, quite a long time ago, actually, when I still lived nearby. But they haven't been overseas again, and I was kind of surprised by that. My one friend, the wife is a teacher, and so she has the summers off. And I said, are you interested in traveling abroad, overseas? And they both kind of smiled, and then the husband, who I've known for just forever, he said, I don't do well with hardship of any kind. Sit on that. I've been mulling that over for weeks. I don't do well with hardship of any kind. And, I've known him for years, and he has a very dry sense of humor. So with someone with a dry sense of humor, it's like there's truth, there's maybe a joke in there, maybe some of it's not true. There's a spectrum of what could be reality in a statement. And I didn't pursue it. I just sort of laughed because it was a very him statement. It's like, oh, that tracks. That tracks. But then, oh my gosh, being a Buddhist and a meditator and in this framework for 20 years, I had to ask myself, can I deal with hardship of any kind? What happens to me when I'm facing hardship? Furthermore, what is hardship? What do I consider to be hardship? Because I'm thinking about my friend, and he climbs the sides of mountains, which sounds really hard to me, and he builds iPhone apps, which sounds really hard to me. But his view of hardship is different than mine, it must be, or similar. Like, for example, when we flew to Minnesota this last time, it was an objectively horrible flight. And in many ways, I love to travel. I walk into an airport and I'm like, let's go. Like, I've been that way since I was a little kid. And this flight, I finally realized why people just hate it, why RVs sell so quickly. It was just busy and crowded and screamy, And we took a 6 a.m. flight, and some of us were up at 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and by the time we got to Minnesota, we were really at each other's throats. And I do this practice for a living. And yet, I wanted to abandon my family at the first Starbucks. It was not beautiful, guys. And so, with what my friend said, and then thinking back to this experience, I was like, okay, I get that's hardship. This is the hardship he's talking about, hardship that he's not choosing, you know. It's the hardship that happens when you walk into a room or a plane full of people that are completely unpredictable under the age of 5. They don't care, and they shouldn't care about my ability to manage hardship. They're just living their lives like I'm just living my life. So I've been looking at this at Kanti and what it really means, and how to develop this ability to patiently endure with the unpleasant, to patiently be with the unpleasant. And what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, it's it's an inside job. So when I come in contact with the unpleasant, I come into my body. With any luck, I'm already there. But are we? Are we walking around in our bodies? Or are we walking around in our heads? So I come into my body. And when I come into my body, like you'll recognize this from meditation, when I come into my body, I realize that there's stress there's tension, there's some muscle somewhere, even if it's just this one, is engaged. So I come into my body and I let go of my muscle. I let go of muscle tension. And as soon as I let go of muscle tension, space arises. The lack of muscle tension, space arises. So then I can see what the suffering actually is in that space. When the space arises, the knowing of the suffering arises. What is suffering? It's wanting things to be other than the way they are. That's it. It's wanting things to be other than the way they are. This is not rocket science, as they say. This is not climbing this side of a mountain. It's wanting things to be other than they are. So when I come into my body and I relax the tension in my body, then I can see that that tension was being caused by wanting things to be other than the way they are. I don't actually even need to deal with the content of what's happening. I can deal with my heart. And then after that, there's some remembering, remembering that suffering is optional. Pain, as they say, is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. So I've experienced pain. I've gone into my body. I've relaxed the muscles. I've gotten some space. I can see the suffering for what it is and what causes it. And then I remember that it's optional, or that it can end. There's a cessation to suffering. And then, maybe step 4, or just the culmination of the first 3 steps, is letting it go. Letting it go. And letting it go, looks like, it's kind of a cheat, but it looks like starting all over, doesn't it? We're just letting it go. Letting it go is coming into the body. It's relaxing the muscles. It's getting some space. It's seeing it clearly. But it's also making a choice not to react, from a place of tension, not to react from a place of unskillfulness, not to react from a place of anger, delusion, or anxiety. It doesn't mean we don't react or respond or act, maybe. If something is happening that needs to stop, then we got to act. We have to move. But over time, we can learn to move from a place of skillfulness. Yes, this is the next right thing to do. It might bring me in conflict with somebody, might bring me some discomfort. There might be hardship in it. But if I think, after having taken a moment to collect myself, move, or talk, or say something, then I move as much as possible from a place of goodwill, usefulness, truthfulness, kindfulness, rather than from a place of panic or reaction or anxiety or frustration. And then, we do that 80 million more times until we're dead. Or until it becomes habit. The habit of being with things as they are, acting from a place of skillfulness, not waiting for things to be over, but rather, I like the simile, the analogy of the crucible, The crucible, of course, you've heard this term, but, physically, it is a container that you can put like metals and other materials in to melt at really high temperatures. And so, the crucible is the Dhamma. The crucible is not going to break or melt or shatter or bend, but it will hold all this other stuff that needs to transform. So, we can rely on the Dhamma in these situations. We can rely on our integrity. We don't have to cross our own boundaries. This is how we hold more than one thing: contentment and diligence, patience and action. We're building our integrity and using the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path, right speech, all that good stuff, to hold the heart as it transforms. So I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you. If anything has been of benefit, please take it with you and put it into practice. And the rest, just leave it here.